my crafty people out there. My name is Stephanie, and I am going to be making a little girl's dress out of this very wild print men's shirt. I don't know if the guys are still wearing these wild prints or if this is the thing. I got this at Goodwill, as you can see, my little yellow tag here, and it is a Old Navy classic shirt, and it's a slim fit, which I usually would work with a larger one. It's still an extra large, but what I'm going to be doing, the dress size I'm going to be making, is small enough where this will accommodate the pattern. And yes, I said pattern. I am creative, but patterns have always been the way I've gone. I can do some things without patterns, but I love a couple of specific patterns for these little girls' dresses. They're super easy, and I will share with y'all the pattern that I'm using, and we will go through every step. The good thing about this particular shirt, there's several good things, but it's short sleeved, so we're going to be doing sleeves where we don't have to do anything extraordinary to put the little casing in for the elastic. And I'm going to be taking this pocket off because it'll be in the way of the little dress, and I think we may either put a monogram on this, or we're going to put this looks like water to me, so I think I might put a little whale on it. This is for my granddaughter, so I have made her more than her share of dresses, but you know, toddlers can't have enough. So I'll be right back. I'm going to go take the pocket off, and I'm also going to cut up the sides, cut the sleeves off, and then we'll see what we've got left to work with the pattern. And again, I'll show y'all the pattern at that time. Okay, everybody, through the magic of film, I have taken the pocket off. One good thing about this particular shirt is this wild pattern. Because it's so busy, you don't really see the little holes that you get in a lot of the solid color shirts where the pocket's sewn on. But no worries if you do find those in the shirts. It's really, if you brush the fabric where the pocket was, or if you wash it, a lot of times those holes will go away. They won't vanish completely immediately, but with wear they go away. And you won't see a lot of that because this particular small dress, it would cut across the pocket area, so it wouldn't be a big issue. And I've cut off one of the pockets, one of the sleeves, sorry. So I wanted to show you how I'm doing that. I am really just making it simple, and I'm following the good old seam line. Now I usually cut on the side of the seam that is hard to see, but this side of the seam where the stitching folds over, I just find it easier. Honestly, it doesn't matter either way. You're just needing to cut the two sides apart essentially. So I'm just gonna cut up this side, and it just makes it easier, especially if you've got a decent pair of scissors. Now sometimes, especially when this is a long sleeve, what I would do is I would stop here and cut around the sleeve here and leave the sleeve whole. But I know I'm going to use this sleeve for her sleeves, so I'm just going to cut all the way down that seam line, and then it cuts it open like that. And then I'm just going to follow the seam line again on the side of the fold and cut the sleeve off. Just make sure I don't have any bulky parts when I'm trying to line my pattern up. And I'm gonna have to cut that little yellow tag off. just plastic. I believe, at least here in this particular state and city, I go to Goodwill and I can usually get 3 men's shirts for $11.99, and I round my penny up. And they, like I said, men's shirts are a great option for fabric. Lots and lots of fabric. I had a 4XB that I found the other day in that nice minty green Oxford. It was so huge, I just made myself a dress. So now I've got 2 sleeves. I got a pocket. Of course, you can't see that as busy as this particular pattern is. I'm going to move those over to the side. And now I have my sleeveless, open-sided shirt. So this is what we're going to make our dress out of. We won't need the collar. Haven't found a use for the leftover collars yet. If anybody's got any ideas, by all means, please comment and let me know. And let me get the pattern. I have a couple of choices, but I think today we're going to make what I call the little pilgrim dress. And let's see. Now, this does not look like a pilgrim dress per se. This is a Kwik Sew. It is number 3935. I should know this, I've had this forever. And it is, particularly this one, is in the extra small, I think all the way to large. Extra small. Now, my little granddaughter is just turning 2 in August, so, and she's tiny, so I make her the extra small. And I don't know how many of you have experience with patterns, or maybe I'm telling my age with this, but patterns, they used to, I believe, come with all the sizes separate. Well, now they don't. They come like this, where all the sizes are there, and as soon as you cut one, you can't use the others. So the best thing to do for that, especially if you've got 2 granddaughters, which I do, you use some good old tracing paper, and you can get this thing in large quantities. Here's my extra small I've traced. And let's see, it only is 3 pieces that I need. Here's my front and my back and my little sleeve. So now I've got all 3 of the pieces I need. These are different sizes, which E will grow into eventually. And I'll put them back in here. Now, I've made these dresses quite a few times, but I always feel a little more comfortable if I've got the directions right here. So we're going to go through this process. It's super simple, and the first thing we're going to do, I'll move this over here, is I'm going to button my dress, or the shirt. Button the shirt up, and when I button it up, that'll give me essentially 2 pieces of whole fabric, because we're going to use these buttons as the front of the dress. And I also sew up this this button strip just so they don't come open, and because I mean they don't need to be. That's going to be like a little elastic neckline, so it's going to go right over her head. She's not going to need any kind of closure, opening, whatever. So now I have 2, let's pattern back over here. I have 2 pieces of fabric essentially. I've got the back of the shirt and the front of the shirt. Now, there's a couple of different ways you could do this. Every shirt seems to be a little different. If you center your fold over the buttons, kind of like it would naturally fold behind the buttons here, behind the button placket or whatever they call that, I'm not sure. You'll notice that your seams don't match. So if you want your seams to match, which could be important futuristically, you can just check and make sure. The only ones you're really worried about is the bottom. We are going to use the hem of this shirt as the hem of our dress, because if I haven't got some hem something, I'm all for it. So this is the fabric we have to work with. Again, it's a small dress, so this is going to be fine. This is my back. This is my front. It's a little shorter. This particular little outfit is much longer in the back. We don't really need to take that into account, and I'll show you how. All right, this is the fold. So we're going to have it turned upside down so we can meet our fold, which our fold is our button line. Okay, you see this little point right here? This is the point of the pattern that's going to meet the other side. My main concern is that this hemline meets this point on both sides. That way, when I sew up this side, when I sew the two sides together, I don't have to worry about this hem. This is going to be a little longer than the dress, but it's not going to be a big problem. If you wanted to make it a little shorter, you would just get it down here, but when you measure up to the other side, you would make sure that your side seams matched at that hemline. It's going to make sense, I hope. All right, let me get my pens. My grandson was playing with my pens. I hope they're all here. And we're going to pin, and we're meeting the edge of the button strips here. I'm going to pin this first. You can see I'm just putting that pin right there. And then I'll put one here. Now, my grandmother was a firm believer in pins, and I do my fair share of pinning. But when it's a straight line like this, I'm not too worried about it, because honestly, we're not even going to cut that straight line. I'm just using it more as a placeholder. So we're just putting our pins in down here. Always pin the curve well, because that's where your scissors are going to give you the most trouble. I'm going to go ahead and pin this area. Now, one good thing I'm noticing automatically, this button is at least 2 inches down from the top of my seam, or the top of my neckline, and that will give me plenty of room to do a casing for a little 1/4 inch elastic. Sometimes the buttons are really close to the top and you have to adjust this to make sure you don't hit one of the buttons, or the button doesn't land in the wrong spot at the top of the neckline. It's kind of gauging as you go. Every shirt is different, every designer is different. Some designers have very close buttons, others no. This particular one has pretty far spaced buttons, but at least they're not going to be in the way. So now I have pinned the front of my dress. I'm just going to cut it out. Now there are some notches on this dress, and of course notches are used to kind of tell you how to line things up, or front and back. Most front pieces will have single notches, most back pieces will have double notches, that kind of thing. and there's one right there, but I really don't need that notch, and I'll tell you why. Because I know the front and back, so it's not really necessary. Or if I want to, I can put a notch just on the back or just on the front, and that will also help me. Now this is a little off because I didn't take my time and line it up, but we're going to make that work. So I'm going to sewing is a lot like anything else. Measure twice, cut once. And see, I got it off a little here. There's a little bit of difference, but we're going to make it work. And now we're going to fold the back. I'm going to be a little more careful about lining it up. It's a little easier on the back because there's not a button trail to try and divide and conquer. So what we want to do here though is when we lay out this pattern or this piece of fabric, because that's all it is at this point, is a piece of fabric, and get those lines up as nice as we can. And then we're going to bring our back up here. I'm going to put it on the fold. And then we're going to make sure that these two meet up at the seam line, or the hem line, sorry. So we're going to pull that down because we want these two pieces where they're going to meet. Let me see it a little better this way. These two pieces are the side seams of the dress, and we want them to connect at that hem so we don't really have to worry about a hem. And we're going to be doing that with a serger, so we can be a little bit more open with that. Sergers are great correctors to some errors, especially with kids' clothes. So lining that up, that looks about good. It's not an exact science. So we're going to pull that back a little. I'll just check it one more time. That's good. So now we're going to pin the back. And again, I don't have to pin right here, but it just keeps things straight. And you don't have to pin down the fold either, unless it just makes you feel better. And then we're going to go all the way up here to the top to make sure we've got everything lined up. And I'm using white glass head pins. I got hooked on these at a sewing school in Huntsville that no longer exists, or I don't think it does, not in the manner it was at least. They may still have some type of sewing schools, but they are great because they seem to be super narrow as far as they're not a bulky pin, and then because they're glass heads, you can iron over them, so they're not going to bleed or melt onto your fabric. That's very important. All right, on this one, I am going to cut this little notch over here on the sleeve, just so I have one side that's notched, so when I go to line my sleeve up, it'll be a little easier. I always cut my notches out, not in. I'm always afraid if I cut them in, I may cut too much and make it difficult for my seam allowance. So that was something I've always done. Make that a little neater. All right, now we have all this left over. And again, I have collars out the yin yang. So if anybody's got any ideas for collars used, let me know. I figured out something for the cuffs. I'll show that to y'all one time too. So I've got the front and the back. Now let's get these sleeves. Now, hopefully they will be big enough. I think they should be. I'm going to take the pocket out, leave it over there. And I'm going to put these right sides together just to make it easier. And we want to get these hemlines on these sleeve cuffs lined up, because I want to be able to use that hem to my advantage and not have to hem or put a casing in my little sleeve for the 1/4 inch elastic. Now the top doesn't line up perfect, but as long as your pattern goes completely over it, which it does, got plenty of room. There we go. Sometimes you have to flip it. Like this needed a little more room over here. Let's see if we can line that up a little better. Make sure we get these hems, because those are going to be our time saver in this particular piece. All right, those are going to work great. Okay, a piece of plastic. And what we're going to do, we're going to pin this just like we did the other piece. Right down. Now I like to kind of get my corners set right first. So I'm just setting that hemline first. Making sure that it's nice and lined up. I'm not cut. Well, I don't know where that little pin came from. We're not going to be cutting the bottom, but we need it to line it up. All right. And our corner here. And our corner here. And then our notches. And again, double notches generally, I've noticed, could be crazy. They won't go there, but they generally happen in the back. Double notches in the back and single notches in the front. Like connecting this sleeve, there's the double notch, so this is the back of the dress. But I'm sure that might not be set in stone. Double notch right there, because it was the back of the dress that we cut our notch in. We just want to be able to kind of say, oh yeah, there's the front and there's the back. I think the shape and the size of the seam do that for us, but it never hurts to have a little help there. Alright, these are pretty simple lines. Just a little curvature, and not going to worry about that notch. But again, I cut my notches out, not into my fabric, because it's a little bit of scrap. So now we have sleeves, 2 sleeves. We have the back of the dress, and we have the front of the dress that has the buttons. Okay, now, okay everybody, we're going to do a little piecing together here. We're going to start our dress. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the back of the dress. This doesn't have the buttons. I'm going to lay it down right side up. I'm going to take my sleeve, and remember we put a notch, I don't know if you can see that little notch right there, in the back so we could line up the sleeve, or just know for sure we got the back and the sleeve lined up. So we're going to take this and make sure it lines up. Okay. Now see, if I was trying to line up the other side without the notch, see how much shorter it is? It's a lot more short than this back piece. So we'd know even without the notches, but again, I am sure it doesn't hurt to have a little extra. So what we're going to do is we'll put these together. Now in this particular scenario, my main concern is that this hem, this line that's down the side of the dress meets this sleeve very neatly, because the collar, when we're putting the casing in for the collar, there's a little more forgiveness there. So my main concern, again, right sides together. I'm going to make sure this sleeve meets the dress very well right there at that point. See? That's the edge of the sleeve, and this is the side of the dress. So we're going to sew this sleeve on, and then we're going to sew the other sleeve, and then we're going to sew the front and the back with those sleeves. And I am a big serger fan. I wasn't in the beginning. This thing used to terrify me because it'll take a finger off if you don't know what you're doing. So again, I'm just checking this. Now I can hear my grandmother saying, "Why aren't you pinning that?" But sergers move pretty fast, and it's just kind of a pain to keep moving and taking those pins out. Of course, I am struggling to get this there. All right, make sure. Feel pretty good that that's on that point. All right, and then it just turns on me. There we go. And you'll make sure you get that lined up. Make sure that is lined up. Now, every pattern, at least every one I've ever worked with, has what they call a seam allowance. And the most common seam allowance for clothing is 5/8 inch. Now, because, I don't know, I'm not really concerned about that. I've been doing this for a while. I'm just using the presser foot on my serger as my allowance. It comes out to be probably closer to a little over 1/4 inch, but as long as you're consistent, then your clothing will be right. In other words, if you did a 5/8 inch here and a 1/2 inch there, then your clothing would not look right. It would come out uneven in places it shouldn't. So anyway, we're gonna just carefully serge this. And again, I'm just going with my presser foot. I have a little bit coming off the edge, and I usually take a little less, but I've got a really funky angle going here. And you just run it off. I don't know if anybody else uses a serger. I'm sure y'all do. And I cut it over here. Now, this is what I cut off, but honestly, I usually cut less. So we're just going to make sure that we're consistent. We cut that same amount off when we put the other sleeve on. And we're going to pull the other sleeve over here. We know where our notch is. It's a double notch. And we're going to put it right sides together with our dress. And this time I'm going to be looking at it from this side, make it a little easier. Okay, get that corner lined up. Give it a little bit, and then we're going to make sure we've got that lined up. Again, we're just making sure we got everything lined up. It's a little bit complicated. Now, what we have is we have our little dress started. We have one sleeve on the back here and the other sleeve. So it looks huge right now, but it's going to be small. So now we're going to bring our front piece, the one with our buttons, and we're going to put, again, right sides to right side. And again, we're concerned about that little corner where the hem meets, well, the sleeve meets the side. We're going to make a lot of flourishing movements. And let's see if we can pick up our presser foot here and get that going. Cutter. And then now we've almost got the dress sewn side to sides, but before we do that, I'm going to run over to the machine, the sewing machine, not the serger, and I am going to sew this placket down. I'm just going to sew on the side that's opened, go right down that seam line, and that way this won't come up on the dress, it won't come open. Alright, I'm going to show y'all this. I forgot about this part. Usually I do this before I start putting it together. But I'm going to take this little part that's got the buttons on it, and I'm going to sew down this seam to make sure that it's secure and it won't come open. Because, again, the neck is going to be elastic, and she doesn't need any type of opening, closing. Now, this particular one is wide enough where I think I can slip by this button without changing my foot out. But if the buttons are really close to the edge of the placket, then you can actually use a zipper foot, and that will get you close to that button. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the angle of my needle to be all the way as far over to the right hand side of the presser foot, and then I'm just going to, and I'm going to, that little line that's on the last notch of my presser foot is going to line up with this stitching on the side of the button placket. And then we're just going to find our presser foot. We're going to go down there and we'll do it. My grandmother always told me that when you started stitching, you did a back stitch. Now this machine, I don't think it needs that, but I can hear in the back of my head, so I always do it. And see, that worked right. These buttons just went right over the presser foot, so not a big problem. But if you do have, like I said, close to your button, you want to get closer to your button than you can with the wide regular presser foot, you can always change over to a zipper foot, and it'll get right down there beside your button. So you can pretty much follow that line, and then it doesn't look like you did anything different, like you made it. And I'm also checking down here. Sometimes, a lot of times actually, there'll be extra buttons down at the bottom of the shirt. And this particular one does not have that, which is good. So I'm just making sure it lines up down here. And we're going to just keep on going. Just push that little button over. Now, it doesn't line up perfectly down here at the bottom, but that's kind of the fun of these shirts. It's not a perfect thing. Now, sometimes it will. I mean, the better made shirts will line up perfect. This one, it's not the best made shirt. But we're not going to say that out loud. Anyway, so now we've got the placket sewn up, the little buttons. Now, sometimes I will do the other side as well, but it's really not necessary because this is closing the main part. What? I'm sorry, my cat's making noises. So now we're going to go back to the serger, and we're going to finish putting this sleeve to this side of the dress, and we will have a whole dress top made. Okay? Okay. Hopefully y'all can hear me again. All right. Now, I'm going to, again, we're going right sides to right sides. You always want your seams on the inside. Well, at least in this particular case, I want this to look nice. If you were doing a more boho style, I guess you could put the seams on the outside, but this particular fabric would fray like crazy. All right, again, I'm going to line up that corner where my sleeve meets the side seam. That's my most important seam. Put it under my serger. And let's start. Oh, I have the worst trouble losing my feet. My presser feet. Not my presser feet. My pedal. Anyway. Make sure we hold it straight. I probably could sew a lot faster, but I'm always checking my seams, make sure that they're straight and they're lined up. So now, what I have is kind of looks like a closed up hospital gown because of the fabric. Anyway, so now you can see, here's my little buttons that go down the front. Here's my collar. These are the little sleeves that again are already hemmed. So the next thing we're going to do is I am probably going to, I think I might embroider something on this. My sewing machine is a embroidery / sewing machine. I think I'm going to put something right here, kind of break up this wild pattern. I don't think I'm going to put the pocket back on because it just fades right in, unless I was going to do a circle for the embroidery, but I think I'm just going to do some kind of little thing over here. And it's easier for me to do that before I do the construction. But I can show you one side of it, but we'll get to that. I'll come back when I've got the embroidery done.